After several years of owning this old terrarium, I finally went ahead and I bought my dream enclosure, which is this 3-foot tall enclosure from Exo Terra. Over the last 6 months, I've slowly but surely been building up the vivarium. I started off by creating a custom DIY spray foam back wall, and I also created some bamboo towers that eventually are going to be home to the new inhabitants of this tank. Though after 6 months of staring at a bare enclosure, I finally got some plants, and in today's episode, we're going to add some green into the vivarium. Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. And you might be wondering to yourself why it took 6 months to, well, get to the point where I'm actually going to start adding in some plants. And well, the reason for all of that is that the old 4-foot terrarium was actually right here in this spot, and it took up obviously quite a lot of space, and I had quite big plans to obviously make more space. And a few videos back, I finally actually created more space so that I can actually start more projects and to also continue working on the 3-foot tall vivarium. Now, in that video, I did replace these cupboards here. I had some wider ones and they were black. And obviously, as mentioned, the 4-foot terrarium was here. Now, I didn't want to go ahead and actually add plants, substrate, and all of that into the vivarium because I still need to move it around a little bit. And it was obviously in the middle of the room here, and to move everything that is here against the wall, plus a vivarium that is, well, way heavier than it is now, that would have been a little bit tricky. So I just never went ahead and actually added in substrate or plants and waited till I actually had the space to move in the vivarium over here. Yet before I actually add in the substrate layer and the plants to the vivarium, there are still a few things that I need to do. I still want to paint the cupboard black. That's just going to hide my, well, woodworking skills. I did build a DIY cupboard for the vivarium. It was actually planned to be on this cupboard here, though unfortunately I just never measured the footprint of the vivarium, and that aquarium cupboard here was just a little bit too small, and my woodworking skills are not the best, so I hope black paint is going to cover that up a little bit. The other things that I still need to do is to actually glue down a few pieces of bamboo. Some of them are just still quite loose and still standing around in the vivarium. Plus, I also need to add in a few holes into the bigger pieces of bamboo so that the geckos can actually enter the bamboo and actually also live inside of the bamboo. To do all of these things, I need to, well, move the entire vivarium and the cupboard out of its place. I need to remove all of the plants. I need to remove all of the bamboo, and I also need to remove the mica in the bottom. So let me do all of that. Then I can paint the cupboard. And once I got the cupboard painted, then we can address the bamboo, and then we can start adding in some plants. The cupboard is done. It is completely painted black, and I also still added one layer of wood glaze on the front and on the top. At least the wood is a little bit protected from any sort of water that might leak onto it, but it's done. Now, the next thing I need to do is actually drill a few holes into the bamboo, especially the big one right here, and maybe into this one right here, so that the geckos can actually get into the bamboo. They like to live inside the bamboo, lay their eggs there and raise their young. There are no openings at the moment, so I'm going to place the bamboo back into the vivarium just roughly where they should be in the final layout, and just mark a few holes, and then I'm going to take my Dremel or my drill, just drill a few holes into them. Then we can add in the false bottom again and start adding in the substrate, place these back inside, and then get all of the smaller pieces of bamboo that are sort of running vertical inside here. I need to silicone them to the glass and add a bit of substrate onto the silicone still, and then everything should be ready for plants. And I almost nearly forgot, I also need to still address this piece of wood right here. It goes all the way to the very bottom of the vivarium. I don't need it to go all the way down into the false floor, so I'm also just going to chop it off. That is also just going to make it way easier for me to actually add in the false bottom and to add in the substrate. That one piece of wood there, well, it's a little bit in the way, and as mentioned, I don't need it to go all the way down to the bottom of the tank. It is the next day. I still needed 2 more things to continue with the vivarium build, and one of them being a bag of substrate, and the other was a dividing layer between the substrate and the drainage layer. For that, I got a whole rolled up mat of hemp fiber. This is obviously going to be completely biodegradable and won't be in any form, well, devastating to the ecosystem, and this I'm going to use as the dividing mat. It's going to keep the substrate separate from the drainage layer, so we're not going to have a complete mixture in the bottom of the vivarium. Yesterday I also finished off drilling all of the holes into the bamboo, and in order to actually add everything into the vivarium, I first need to actually add the drainage layer and the substrate layer, because I need the bamboo towers to actually be in the final position before I can add in the rest of the bamboo sticks that go all across, which I also still need to glue to the glass. So let's get to do that quickly. These are all of the ingredients that I'm going to be using for the substrate layer. It's going to be a very nutrient-rich and fluffy substrate. It's going to drain water quite well. It's also going to retain water quite well. And, well, what do I all have? Well, I've got a bag of potting soil. I have some orchid soil, which is mainly, well, bark. That's going to be quite good. I have some charcoal. This is going to, well, filter the water a little bit. I'm going to add this as the first layer. Then I have some sand. Sand in soil is also just good. It just keeps the soil nice and fluffy. I have some aqua soil as well. Aqua soil, being rich in nutrients, going to just be perfect for the plant. And I have a little bit of sphagnum moss still left that I'm going to add in as well. That's also going to retain water. It's going to keep everything fluffy. Let's mix it all together. There's no real ratio on how I'm going to be mixing everything together. The main ingredient obviously is going to be the potting soil, and I'm going to add as I see fit. But the first thing I want to do is crush up some charcoal that I'm just going to add onto the hemp mat. And then on top of that, we can add our substrate mixture. Just cleaned my hands a little bit. I wish the bucket were a little bit bigger for mixing, but it did the job. And I have my bamboo on the side as well. Let's start adding in the substrate. Let's start adding in the bamboo and get closer to actually start adding in some plants. The next thing to do is I need to add in the rest of the bamboo pieces. I have a few more pieces here that I also chopped off at a 45-degree angle. These are going to be against the glass, and I have some very quick drying silicone that I'm going to, well, just plop onto the front here. We can add them in. The other ends also need to go into the back foam wall still, so I need to make a few cuts there. But once these are in, we can continue. Okay, I got all of the diagonal pieces in, but I'm waiting for glue to dry. It's gonna take a little bit of time, so yeah, I'm just gonna be standing here until it is actually cured. A few more days have gone by since I added in the substrate and all of the bamboo to the vivarium, I did try to remove all the, well, visible white silicone that I used to glue in all of the diagonal pieces, though it is still a little bit visible, but I don't mind. Once I have the plants inside, it's going to hopefully become a little bit more invisible. But as you guys can see, I have all of the plants in front of me. Now, I'm no expert on terrestrial plants, but I'll name all of the plants right here. And I'll also put all of the names of the plants down in the description. I also want to give a huge shout out to the Beef Jerky official. He gave me quite a list of plants that I could have a look at. And I also have a few right here. I also have a few trimmings of Saligenella uncinata that I took out of my little mini jar terrarium. And it's going to be an awesome little addition to the vivarium as well. And something that I'm quite excited about is this. This is moss paste, and it is finely ground up sphagnum moss, and it contains a bunch of different moss spores inside. And I already mixed up a batch here. It is recommended to soak it in dechlorinated or distilled water for at least an hour. It's very important to do it with dechlorinated water, since moss and moss spores do not tend to do well with chlorine. So I used some distilled water, and well, it's been soaking for quite a while and it's quite the paste. But this I'm going to add all over the back wall and most probably around some of the plants, especially the bromeliads. Over time, the moss spores are going to start sprouting. It's going to look quite cool, but it is going to take quite a bit of time. Though before I add the moss paste, I do need to spray down the entire back wall. The moss paste is just going to adhere better to a wet surface instead of a dry one. And I'm also going to be using distilled water to spray down everything. I'm quite excited to get started, and I've kept you waiting on planting the vivarium for way too long. So let's actually get started. There we go. The vivarium is planted finally, and I think it looks absolutely amazing. It was a little bit fiddly working around all of the bamboo. It might, or it would have maybe been a little bit better if I would have added in the bamboo after I did the planting. I did manage, it all worked out, and yeah, there's finally plants inside of the vivarium. This has been months and months and months in the works. In the end, I almost forgot to add in the Salaginella uncinata. I did still add all of it, and I also didn't mention in the very beginning that I also had a few air plants lying around, which I also added. I think the air plants just add that tiny little bit of touch. I also added in the rest of the moss paste just everywhere around. Hopefully that's going to grow, and whatever moss paste I still had left over, I still added in the foreground here on the substrate, so hopefully the moss will actually start growing here. But yeah, it is all planted. All I need to do now is still just reinstall the misting system and actually also install a hygrometer and thermometer, both of which are from Exo Terra as well. The misting system I still need to play around with a little bit. I did make a complete review video on the Monsoon Multi 2 that I'm going to be using on the vivarium. I wasn't too pleased with the way that it was spraying. I do think that the piping was a little bit too long, so I'm going to shorten the pipes on the misting system, reinstall everything here, test it out and see if it mists a little bit better, and well, then we are all done for now. Vivarium is in its place. It is finally planted. The misting system is hooked up. After I shortened the pipes, it does spray way better. The Monsoon Multi 2 is quite loud though, so I might need to put a mat underneath the mist maker. Hopefully that might help with the noise, but the vivarium is finally actually a vivarium. Though I can't call it a full-on bioactive environment yet. That is going to be in the next video. I'm still waiting on a few orders. I am absolutely pleased with the way that it turned out. It is no longer just a barren landscape. It is actually green and lush, and well, I would consider this a rainforest and definitely ready for some inhabitants. If you guys did enjoy the video, please leave a like and a comment down below. It would help the channel out so much. Subscribe to the channel. There is still way more content to come, especially in the next episode where we are going to be adding in some animals, and maybe by the next episode we might actually have the animals as well that are actually going to inhabit the bamboo and everything. But yes, thank you so much for watching, and I would say I'll catch you guys in the next one.